Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this webinar session on summative portfolio advice. First of all, I'd like to say thank you to all those people who have switched from the sessions that were due to run tomorrow and next week. I'm sorry we had to cancel those, but we're trying to maximize our webinar sessions right across all of the sectors that we work in to allow us to be able to get out to as many people as we can in our training providers with advice and guidance, not just around standards and EPA, but across all of our qualification platforms and things that we do. This session is meant to run for about an hour, and I'm joined by my colleague David Wackett, who's the industry manager for the digital sector. So I'll let him just tell you a few things about himself and what's going on.
Ken, and hello, good morning to everybody. Thanks for joining today. I hope everybody's keeping well and safe. As Ken has said, I'm the industry manager for the digital sector here at Sitting with Ken, and in terms of finding out what it is that we need to develop for you and for employers out there in terms of our digital offer applications, and I'm responsible for looking after those as a working closely with centres as well to find out how things are going out there in the real world. So to let you know about what we've got in the pipeline in terms of new products or EPA for standards that we don't already offer. One of the key ones is a digital support technician, which we're planning to have available for first assessments, first EPA, whether people will now be in a position to do so, and you'll be able to see it on Wallgarden as therefore this particular standard. It's a newer standard. It's not one of the original ones that was developed under the guidance of the Tech Partnership. So yeah, we're hoping that we'll have that out there for people to be visible for people to register on fairly soon. The other one is IT technical salesperson, and we're looking to have that available on Wallgarden on our catalogue list. Now that's an existing standard, but it's one of the ones that there's a little bit of uncertainty on the progress of that, considering current circumstances, but we have been involved in meetings with the employer group to feed into that. So we will have an offer for the revised assessment plan, not for the current assessment plan as it stands, as published on the IFATE website. So it will be new. What we'll have is from the current to the new assessment. That will be flexibility, unlike with the old frameworks when you registered a learner and from that point on they had to do those particular qualifications from the point of registration. There will be some flexibility, but obviously we'll be able to tell people more about that nearer the time. So I'll hand you back to Ken. So I'll be in the background, and if Ken needs me at all, I'll chip in, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the webinar.
Thanks, David. So we'll try not to make this too much of a chalk and talk. I know you're all on mute at the moment, but there is a raise your hand button if they're not going to be covered by other things within the webinar. So, please ask your questions in between. We're also going to give you a bit of an update on what Sitting Guilds is doing at this time to support our customers and what materials. There's also some information on how to stay safe at this time when working. Before we do proceed,
hello Ken, David. What was the support technician called? It's a digital support. It's not yet currently. There's no EPAO. It is published. It is available for delivery, but we are hoping to be there from the word go, to be the first EPAO offering that. So it's digital support technician. Thank you. Sorry, Ken.
That's all right. So just before we start going through some advice and guidance around Summative Portfolio, just want to say a big thank you to all our training providers. The overall pass rates for that isn't down to what we're doing, that's down to the work that you through the whole process. So, my sincere thanks to all of you. What you're actually going to see this morning, and also if you join us on the session this afternoon about projects and interviews, is material that we've already presented at a couple of face-to-face workshops that we did in February. The information is based on the reports that we get back from our lead independent assessors and the feedback that they get from apprentices' evidence to enable them to is the EPA gateway evidence. So, if you've got to have that English and maths, or they've got to have the English and maths at level 2, and if they're doing functional skills, it's not and the test that you're using within functional skills. We can accept walled garden evidence. So for those of you who assess with the PRL information, and failing that, if an apprentice comes to you with a level 2 qual, and just sign them to say that you have seen the original and they are authentic. In terms of on-program evidence for the mandatory qualifications that are currently in the standards, we need to see the certifications from those, either ours or off-qual regulated qualifications from other organisations. We will accept those as well. And then the vendor professional certifications as defined by each standard. So many of you will know that infrastructure technician, you can do all 5 exams with us or all 5 as vendor professional products. But the other standards, we can only accept 1 against as an exemption against the knowledge qualifications that are offered as off-qual regulated products. And if you need more advice and guidance on that, then please drop us an email and we can talk you through those in more detail. You won't have an EQA visit against the results of those exams, purely and simply because they're multiple choice and marked online. So there's nothing for an EQA or an EV to actually come out and see at your centres to do those. And the last thing that we need is we do need that gateway declaration form, and it has to be signed by you, by the employer, and by the apprentice. And I would make a small plea. Please try and get a single document signed. I know that's going to be difficult at this time, but if you have to have 3 different documents signed, don't upload them onto the EPA portal as separate ones. Please scan them in, put them in one upload document, and please make sure that at the front of that you say there are 3 signatures here, they just happen to be on separate pages, because we understand that you're not necessarily going to be able to go to the employer or out to the apprentice and get those signed at this time. If you don't do that, then sometimes our EPA team who look to check what's been uploaded, they'll open the first one and may think that the others are just the fact that you've uploaded it twice because systems were slow. So please just make sure that you get all 3 signatures in there. As part of the Summative portfolio, we keep getting asked, will you show us examples? Will you give us a set of headings to use? And we've tried to avoid that, because what do we show you? Do we show you a very official report in the way that organizations like BT or Microsoft might use? Or do we show you something from, say, a small digital marketing agency that employs half a dozen people, where the reporting is very informal? We've tried not to do those sorts of things or to force people into a particular structure. We have tried to give advice and guidance around how to tell the story, how apprentices should tell us the story of who they are, what they do, and how they go about things. And last summer at one of the network workshops we ran, somebody said, well, that sounds very much like the STAR approach that you would use for interviews. And subsequently, what we have found, both myself and my other colleagues in the technical advisor team, is that quite a number of training providers and colleges actually use that. So we've adopted that now as an approach that we think. The first thing that my lead independent assessors have asked, and we don't see it often enough, is we would ask that your apprentices just give us a personal statement, a few sentences, couple of paragraphs right at the beginning. We're not asking war and peace. just to tell us who they are, who they work for, what they do, the sorts of work that they're mainly involved in, and maybe even some of the work that they only peripherally get involved in. Because we do appreciate that some standards are quite broad, and that in some cases they won't necessarily get to do everything. The context for everything we see. So of the standard, then our independent assessors can create a set of questions to ask for more details about how they might do things when it gets to the interview. And then it's about telling us the story. It's about telling us the situation. What was the piece of work? Where did it come from? Why them? Then how are they going to go about doing it? What is the actual task that they've been set to do? And then basically show us them doing it. Then talk about what actually happened at the end. What was the result? What was the outcome? And then we've added an extra R to get a reflection on lessons learned, so that it will enable them to show how they've made those decisions about the way that they've worked through the activity. But that will also link in the learning that you have provided them to show how they've used that learning to make those decisions. And actually, maybe if they went back and looked at something else they'd learned from you, they might change the way that they evidence. There are other things that we have to think about. So it has to be valid. Please, please, please make sure the evidence that is put in by your apprentices is relevant to the standards. We don't need anything that they might have done but didn't, because it isn't going to provide any outcomes against the standards. So don't bother with it. It needs to be authentic. Now, unfortunately, a bit of a copy and paste into our handbooks has said that we want every single page of evidence signed. We don't need every single page of evidence signed. What we need is just the front page of each document that is submitted, signed and dated by you and the apprentice. That will do, because you're going to have to complete an authentication declaration form anyway that needs to be signed by you and the apprentice, and that will cover all the other pages. Current is always an issue. What is current? What can they submit? What should they submit? We will only accept evidence from when they started the apprenticeship program. So if they are, let's say, a mature student, somebody who's worked in the organization but's now been put on an apprenticeship to get certification of what they do, anything they did prior to joining the apprenticeship program, don't bother. It has to be current from the program. Equally, anything they do at home or they've done previously at college or in school, again, it isn't going to be classed as relevant to the standard and the program they're on. So make sure that everything they do is from whenever they have started. Okay? And we don't mind if something comes in the first 2 or 3 weeks, if that's the best bit of evidence or the only bit of evidence that they're going to get against certain outcomes. The other thing I probably should say is, once you have submitted the evidence and you have declared gateway, you cannot add anything else into the portfolio. However, and I'll cover this afternoon, if they do then do something brilliant, they can always make a note of that and take those bullet points about the brilliant thing they've done past gateway into the interview to talk about. In terms of sufficient, this is really a tough one. You know, are we looking for 2,000 pages or are we looking for 2 pages? Basically, it's about quality and not quantity. Have they met the outcomes? Is there any evidence that you or they think might be a bit weak, and therefore maybe they need to go back and look at other things that they've done in order to boost that evidence? We want the best. And as I say, if they do something and it's the only thing they've done, it's not particularly brilliant, but it covers 1 or 2 or 3 outcomes, and that's all they've got, please put it in. We can explore that further in the interviews. Make sure that so that we can see that pattern of the way they work and the flow of their thinking. And then the last one is about being consistent. And what we mean by consistent is pick a reporting style, stick to it. Don't change fonts and reporting styles between different documents. Try and get the evidence so that it sets up a rhythm for our independent assessors to go through. So they know that once they've been told what the person is going to do, the next thing that they're probably going to see is actually them doing it. And just keep that as consistent as possible. The other thing we would ask is if they use images from other sources, ones they haven't created, or they're quoting from information you may have provided, please make sure that they reference that fact. We're not looking for Harvard referencing. We're just looking for acknowledgement that whatever they've put in there that isn't theirs, and where they have got that information from. And once they've chosen a particular style, again, of the way they want to reference that information, for consistency purposes, again, please stick to it. And the final thing, and this is a plea from all our independent assessors, it is a summative portfolio. It is a showcase. We're not looking for overdone. We just want the best bits that cover the outcomes. So let's just look at STAR in a bit more detail, and what do we mean by that? So in terms of situation, what we're looking for is we actually did that asking. Just recently, I've looked at a piece of evidence where a marketing agent threw it. So that's where it's coming from. Software updates or hardware updates of systems or software applications, then again, that's where that, and what we'll see is always work on projects, and big project, beginning, middle and end, could be classed as a project if they can talk about it through this STAR format. And for those people working with infrastructure technician or digital marketers where they don't work on big projects, they might work on activities for particular clients, or in the case of infrastructure technician, they might deal with hardware issues or software issues or user particular problems. Then actually there's your streams. And what we would look for there is, I normally deal with here's the sorts of issues I deal with. I deal with hardware issues. These are the typical sorts of things that I get involved with. Here's a few examples of those things that I get asked to deal with. Here's one in particular, and then the detail of that particular one and the results, etc., that come out of it. In terms of the task, detail what the purpose is of what it is they're going to do and the plans of action that they're going to undertake, with an explanation of why they've decided to do things in a certain order or why they've actually decided to do certain actions. So if they choose to install for a particular client a VPN network, why have they chosen a VPN network? What is it about a VPN network that is required or needed or particular to that particular client? And then the action. Walk us through it. Tell us what it is that they're doing. Give us the screenshots or photos or videos with appropriate annotation. Certainly from the digital marketer's point of view, one of the things that we've seen is people just putting in screenshots of a website with a couple of sentences underneath saying, this web page shows you.